Friends, we're living in the most critical and dangerous time for the nation of Israel since 1948. As Hamas terrorists commit war crimes against the Jewish people, most of the world has lost its moral compass, unable to distinguish good from evil. Now more than ever, we need to remember the eternal truths of the Bible. My latest book, Verses for Zion, is an in-depth exploration of biblical teachings about the land, people, and God of Israel and what it means for all of us. Verses for Zion will strengthen your faith and inspire you to stand up against our enemies for Israel, for America, and for Judeo-Christian values. Get your copy of Verses for Zion today at getvfz.com. That's getvfz.com. On July 25th, Vice President Kamala Harris met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the day after she boycotted his speech to a joint session of Congress. After the meeting, Harris spoke to the media. Her remarks repeated common lies about Israel and were a reminder of her long-standing disdain for the Jewish state.
From when I was a young girl collecting funds to plant trees for Israel, to my time in the United States Senate and now at the White House, I have had an unwavering commitment to the existence of the State of Israel, to its security, and to the people of Israel. I've said it many times, but it bears repeating. Israel has a right to defend itself, and how it does so matters.
Okay, first off, I'm calling BS on this claim that she raised funds for tree planting in Israel as a young girl. Kamala Harris is 59 years old. She's 5 years older than I am. Needless to say, I've been a part of the Jewish community my entire life, and I can say that there is zero chance that she ever participated in a campaign in which young children from outside our community would have been raising funds for tree planting in Israel. Zero chance. While it was common in the 1970s and 80s, when she was growing up, in our community for people to make donations for tree planting in lieu of a gift for a bar mitzvah or for some other special occasion, the days of young children raising funds to plant trees in Israel ended long before Kamala's childhood. It certainly makes no sense that a young girl of Jamaican and Indian parents would have done so. Also, notice the implied criticism of Israel at the end there. Israel has a right to defend itself, and how it does so matters. Ah, I get it. What Kamala is saying is that Israel has been wrong to prosecute the war as it has. Never mind that the civilian to combatant casualty ratio is the lowest in history, despite Hamas deliberately putting civilians in harm's way. Never mind that according to the Geneva Conventions on War, Hamas is responsible for any such civilian deaths. For Kamala, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is Israel's fault, and that was the main point of Kamala's speech.
I also expressed with the Prime Minister my serious concern about the scale of human suffering in Gaza, including the death of far too many innocent civilians. And I made clear my serious concern about the dire humanitarian situation there, with over 2 million people facing high levels of food insecurity, and 500,000 people facing catastrophic levels of acute food insecurity. What has happened in Gaza over the past 9 months is devastating. The images of dead children and desperate, hungry people fleeing for safety, sometimes displaced for the second, third, or fourth time. We cannot look away in the face of these tragedies. We cannot allow ourselves to become numb to the suffering, and I will not be silent.
Got that? Never mind that the UN begrudgingly admitted that there's no starvation in Gaza. Never mind that there is so much humanitarian aid entering Gaza that food prices in Gaza markets are actually lower than before the war. Soldiers I've spoken to report that there are pallets of canned goods and sacks of flour piled up in homes and all over the place. Never mind that any humanitarian crisis in Gaza is the responsibility of Hamas, both morally and legally. For Kamala Harris, Israel is at fault because it's destroying an enemy sworn to genocide of the Jews. Kamala claims that she has always had an unwavering commitment to Israel. Emptier words have never been spoken. With Harris now the Democratic candidate for the presidency, her stance on Israel becomes even more important and worthy of scrutiny. Joining me now to break this all down is Jonathan Tobin, who's coming back, a repeat guest here on Eyes on Israel. He is editor-in-chief of the Jewish News Syndicate, and he has been on the Kamala Harris presidential candidacy for quite some time, written a number of pieces on this. Jonathan Tobin, what do we make of Kamala Harris's long-standing commitment to the state of Israel? And more seriously speaking, what does a potential Kamala Harris presidency mean for the U.S.-Israel relationship?
Well, first, thanks for having me on. I think what we heard, in her speech after meeting with Netanyahu, and what was obviously a rather tense meeting after she had boycotted his speech to Congress, was a carefully crafted political statement intended to do two things. One was to signal the minimal amount of support for Israel to maintain the backing of Jewish Democrats, pro-Israel Democrats, the ritualistic statement of support for Israel's right to exist, its right to self-defense, even though she opposes every means of self-defense, along with, as you said, a tall tale about her raising money for JNF. As I wrote, there's something rather ridiculous about the idea that the daughter of a Marxist economics professor would be going door to door in Berkeley, California in the early 1970s to raise money for JNF. I'm sorry, I don't buy that. Although, if she can bring forth proof that she did it, kol hakavod. But the point here is she was signaling to sort of Jewish Democrats who are partisans who will vote for any Democrat, let's be honest. And in America, we're in a very bifurcated political moment. We're a bifurcated society in a hyper-partisan moment. She needs to say the minimal amount for Jewish Democrats to back her and to donate money. But she's also signaling to the left wing of the Democratic Party, to progressives, and she is a San Francisco progressive after all, that she's one of them too. So all of the criticisms of Israel, the repeating of Hamas propaganda about civilian deaths, although it was significant that even Kamala Harris would not say that there's a famine in Gaza. She just talked about food insecurity as if the supply of food to the shelves, to the kitchens, could ever be the same in the middle of a war after you launch a war. But nevertheless, it was all about showing the left wing of the Democratic Party. She's one of them. She doesn't like Israel. She's opposed to its government and is willing to crack down harder than even Biden did. And part of that signaling, which she repeated in her talk, was the idea that she understands and hears the anti-Semites on campuses who have been and who demonstrate in the cities, including in Washington the day before, that she sees and hears them. As I've written, that is the moral equivalent of saying what Democrats falsely accused Trump of saying about the neo-Nazis in Charlottesville, Virginia in August 2017. He did not say they were very fine people. But Kamala Harris, both in that statement and in a couple of statements before that, both this year and in 2021, she is signaling to those who oppose Israel's right to exist, who chant anti-Semitic slogans, that they are very fine people too, that she sees and hears them. So that's very significant, and it ought to send chills down the spines of pro-Israel Democrats that this is what they're getting into. This is what their party now sees as normative.
So what does this mean? We have about 2.5 minutes left. She hasn't yet chosen a running mate, and there's a lot of talk about possibly Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, being chosen. He's, of course, a Jew who is an active member of the Jewish community and is pro-Israel. Do you see that as a legitimate possibility, and what could that do to this dynamic?
Well, it's a possibility. It would displease the left wing of the Democratic Party, which is why many left wing Democrats are speaking up that they don't want to nominate Shapiro, who in many ways is a very normative liberal Democrat. He just happens to be, openly Jewish and Zionist. So even though he was a great supporter of Barack Obama, didn't, one shouldn't exaggerate, where he stands. He's no Likudnik, but it certainly would be a statement to the left wing of the Democratic Party that she's not in their pockets, which is why I'm a little skeptical. But the point is, a Kamala Harris administration, no matter whether she chooses Josh Shapiro or not as her VP, and I'm skeptical, would be more like the Obama administration, which was even more critical of Israel than the Biden administration. It would be one more step towards the distancing of the United States from Israel, from the abandoning of the Democratic Party of its former pro-Israel stance, and into one of hostility, one that is bent on appeasement of Iran, appeasement of Hamas for that matter, because the ceasefire terms that Harris spoke of basically called for a return to the status quo on October 6th. So I think it would certainly be very problematic, a Harris administration for Israel, if not openly anti-Israel. It would be minimally, as Obama did. Obama also supported Israel's right to exist and its right to defend itself. He just never found a means of self-defense that he supported. And that would be true of Harris as well, clearly.
All right, we got 20 seconds left. Jonathan Tobin, please just let everyone know where they can find your writings and where they can find JNS.
Find us at jns.org or at the JNS channel on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you very much, Jonathan Tobin, for joining Eyes on Israel. And let's pray that Donald Trump wins the next election.
Well, I run a nonprofit, so I can't join publicly in that prayer, but look to JNS to find all the coverage of what happens in November.